You misunderstood Imagine's song. You thought Imagine was just a soft, dreamy ballad about peace? You misunderstood. Behind its gentle piano and soothing voice lies something far more radical, a challenge to everything we believe about religion, nations, and possessions. John Lennon wasn't simply asking us to dream, he was asking us to tear down the world as we know it. For decades, listeners have taken Imagine at face value, a song about dreaming of peace on earth and harmony among people. They see it as Lennon's call to love and a universal hymn to kindness. Many even consider it a spiritual or almost religious anthem because of its meditative tone. But the reality is more provocative. Lennon was asking people to literally imagine a world without religion, borders, or possessions. For him, peace can only exist when humanity let go of the very systems that divide us. Far from being a sweet lullaby, Imagine was a political and philosophical statement, one so bold that critics at the time called it naive, utopian, and even dangerous. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. John Lennon wrote Imagine in 1971, after the breakup of the Beatles during his solo career. At the time, Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono were deeply involved in peace activism. Their famous Bed-ins for Peace had already made headlines, and Lennon wanted to translate those ideas into music. The main lyrical inspiration came directly from Yoko Ono's 1964 conceptual art book, Grapefruit, which featured poetic instructions like imagine the clouds dripping, dig a hole in your garden to put them in. Lennon later admitted that much of the song's lyrical concept was influenced by Ono's art and credited her as a co-writer decades later. The recording itself was minimal, just Lennon on piano, with strings arranged by Phil Spector. Its simplicity made the message even more powerful. The world was in turmoil. Vietnam War, political unrest, Cold War tensions, and Lennon believed Imagine could be both a protest song and a universal prayer. This is the heart of the discussion, and the biggest section. While some see the song as vague idealism, Lennon's lyrics are layered with meaning. Let's break down the major themes. A world without religion. Imagine there's no heaven. Imagine all the people living for today. Lennon challenges the idea of an afterlife and religious separation. He suggests that focusing on heaven or hell distracts from fixing the problems of the present world. By removing religion as a dividing force, humanity could unite without dogma or holy wars. A world without countries. Imagine there's no countries, nothing to kill or die for. Borders and nationalism have historically caused wars. Lennon imagines a world where people are not defined by nationality but by shared humanity. It was a radical concept, especially during the Cold War when nations were at odds. A world without possessions. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. This is perhaps the most controversial line. Lennon was questioning capitalism itself. The idea that wealth and materialism create inequality and conflict. Without possessions, greed and class divisions would vanish, and people could live as equals. Utopian vision versus practical reality. Critics argue that Lennon's ideas were utopian fantasies. Could humanity really abandon religion, nations, and possessions? Probably not. But that wasn't the point. Lennon was planting seeds of thought, asking people to reflect on whether the world we've built is truly sustainable for peace. The core message, at its core, Imagine is not about instant solutions but about perspective. It invites listeners to step outside of cultural, political, and religious conditioning and envision a world based on unity rather than division. The message remains as urgent today as in 1971. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. Right from the very first line, Lennon pushes listeners out of their comfort zone. The idea of no heaven was shocking in the early 1970s when religion still played a central role in Western society. Lennon isn't necessarily denying spirituality. He's challenging the institutionalized version of it that often divides people. By inviting us to imagine, he uses gentle language, almost childlike in tone, to soften a radical idea. What if our moral compass wasn't based on the promise of an afterlife, but instead on how we treat each other here and now? This line reframes morality, suggesting that human beings can create meaning without needing to rely on fear of divine punishment or reward. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. This line strikes at the heart of nationalism. Nations are inventions, artificial borders drawn through history, politics, and war. Lennon suggests that imagining a world without them isn't impossible, even though in practice it feels utopian. At the time, the Vietnam War was still raging, a direct result of geopolitical boundaries and power struggles. Lennon's words, therefore, became more than poetry. They were a subtle act of protest against the systems that pit people against each other. The line asks, what if humanity's loyalty wasn't to flags or governments, but to each other as human beings? It was a daring vision of global unity in a century torn apart by nationalism. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. Perhaps the most radical idea of all, and one that hits especially hard in a capitalist society. Lennon knew that letting go of possessions was the most difficult thing for people to picture, which is why he phrases it almost as a challenge. I wonder if you can. This lyric criticizes materialism and consumer culture, exposing how the obsession with wealth and property fuels inequality, greed, and conflict. Interestingly, it's also the line critics often use to accuse Lennon of hypocrisy, since he was himself wealthy and lived in luxury. But that tension is part of the song's power. It doesn't present Lennon as a saint, but as a flawed human voicing a dream that even he struggled to embody fully. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. This is the emotional core of the song. Lennon anticipates the criticism that his vision is naive, unrealistic, or foolish, and he embraces it. By labeling himself a dreamer, he reclaims the word as something powerful rather than weak. But the second half of the line is crucial. I'm not the only one. Here, Lennon positions himself as part of a larger movement, not a lone visionary. It's both humble and empowering, transforming the song from an individual's plea into a collective anthem. This was particularly resonant during the 1970s, an era of mass protests, social change, and countercultural movements. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. The final lyric ties the song together with a direct invitation. Lennon isn't forcing his worldview. He's offering it, like an open hand extended to the listener. The phrase, someday, acknowledges that the dream is not yet reality, but also implies hope that the future can be different if enough people embrace the vision. The world will be as one becomes both a utopian prophecy and a call to action. The line resonates because it moves beyond criticism of society's flaws to a hopeful vision of what could replace them: unity, empathy, and shared humanity. Lennon himself described Imagine as virtually the Communist Manifesto wrapped in sugar. He admitted that the song's message was radical, but deliberately disguised in a beautiful melody so it would be accepted. He also acknowledged Yoko Ono's influence, saying the song Imagine should be credited as a Lennon-Ono song, because a lot of it, the lyric and the concept, came from Yoko. This honesty highlights the song's roots in both activism and avant-garde art. Since its release, Imagine has become one of the most iconic songs in history. It was performed after tragedies, at charity concerts, and even at the Olympics. It's often used as a universal anthem that transcends cultures and languages. However, it's also polarizing. Some criticize it as hypocritical, since Lennon himself lived a wealthy life, or as politically naive. Yet its endurance proves its power. Whether loved or criticized, Imagine forces people to think about what a better world might look like. Artists from Elton John to Lady Gaga have covered it, and it continues to inspire activists, dreamers, and everyday people. More than 50 years after its release, Imagine remains relevant because the world still struggles with division, war, inequality, and greed. Lennon's invitation to Imagine challenges us to question the status quo and believe in the possibility of change. It may not provide answers, but it gives us a vision, and visions are where revolutions begin. That's why Imagine continues to inspire millions, from peace activists to musicians to everyday dreamers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting discoveries.